Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Thomas Mays, and welcome back to Educated Guess. And tonight's episode is actually going over some personal work that I've done on my professional learning plan, which was a task given to me in my integrating technology into teaching class. And what I worked on, it's on my Google site, which is plugged in my description, or in my not my description, in my about page. And if you go to my site, if you go to my professional learning plan page, you'll see what I did, which was looking at different things like attending webinars and watching videos and listening to podcasts and reading articles about tech and education. And I'm just going to quickly go through each one, and this is more of like a video reading of what I curated, because all of this is on my curation page. In my curation page, I did attend excuse me, apologies. I attended a webinar, sorry, called Leveraging Technology to Transform Personalized Learning, which was ran, I believe it's the same people, funnily enough, who made Learning Mouse, which is like an educational uh, website for young children to use to like do,
Educators,
oop,
and
oop,
thank
oop,
you.
oop, sorry. And it is no, not Learning Mouse, my apologies. Age of Learning, the creators of ABC Mouse. And what they went through in it, which was very interesting to me, do I not have? Oh no. There we go. I found my notes on it now. Where it talked about like different studies and things about technology and like proficiency levels for students primarily between like in the middle grades age and elementary age, which had some startling statistics on it for math and reading within 2022. For math for fourth graders, those proficient and above are only 36%, and in eighth grade was 26%. And then for reading, well, for math, it was 36 and then 26 respectively for fourth and eighth graders. And then reading was 33% and 31% that were proficient or above, with the rest being basic and below, which was typically in the 60, like mid to high 60s and low 70s. And so what they had brought up was how can education help with learning and help kind of close this gap, this education gap, which is actually talked about in one of my later articles, which I'll explain in a little bit. But their thing for for educated learning was that they were promoting the idea of personalized learning, which can be done with technology and integrated with it. And some of the foundations of it, which is that it's flexible and adaptive in the environment because you can have ready sources for students to read, interact with, and work with. They can have targeted instruction, which is saying that like if a student reads poems very well, but doesn't really read, I guess I don't want to say like information. We'll go with informational works. You can't pick at what the main idea is. You could give targeted instruction for more academic readings. Another one of the core foundations of it was student reflection and ownership because they would provide their own reflection on what they've learned and how they're learning it, how it works, how it doesn't work, and kind of own their own uh, their own learning, which is pretty neat. And that with all of that, you would make educators would make data-driven decisions to again flexibly make a targeted instruction for a student to work on. And then it also went into how you can leverage technology to make it even more personalized, which is the real-time data, adaptability, and equity of access, and how it's student-centered, and it has a good personalization at a larger scale. Because with things like AI that can read and algorithmically see where students are and kind of group them into different learning sections and say, oh, well, we've noticed that again, the student is good with poetry but not good with academic reading, so we can put them into this group to give more targeted instruction. Next on my PLP, if you go to my website, I talk about watching the How to Use Education Technology as an intro into education into ed tech. It's part of it. But it was a video that was posted, and the speaker was Sam Carey, and he outlines in this video strategies for teachers to integrate technology into classrooms and how it encompasses using digital classrooms for better organization, accessibility, and that offer differentiated learning experiences, which would increase engagement through interactive tools, such as using like interactive maps or VR, and to move away from traditional textbooks, and how technology or ed tech in the classroom would also give freedom for students to choose how they show their knowledge, making stuff like videos, PowerPoints, music videos, dance, things like that, and how they can make, and that using augmented reality or virtual reality can make abstract concepts more tangible. I think one of those, a good example would be something that's done not very often, but showing like how, this is a more advanced level, but showing how time and space interact, or how it's more of a slope in itself. So I think many people have seen that video where it shows a professor or a someone I think at a science museum showing how gravity works with balls on like a tensioned canvas. But you could do that in VR to show students. Next thing I had talked about, I think there is sort of on the same wavelength, but not entirely, was VR and AI specifically in education. Whereas the previous video was just education in general, how it can change and make learning in the classroom transformative. Speaker Christian, I think Tassam, I do apologize if I butchered his last name, discusses the potential of virtual reality and artificial intelligence to change education, and how using like a VR type classroom that students can be in and can sit in could reach a lot more students. Not saying that's practical at the moment, but that it could do that and be more immersive, engaging, and scalable across. So that if, instead of laptops that kids have, every would get like a VR headset, it could attend class that way. So you could still get a head count and see and hear and talk to the students. And then also talking about, funnily enough, Chat GPT as a tool to assist students and not for a student to crutch on, but how it is a vast wealth of information, almost, I believe he said within the video, like Wikipedia, how it is, because it draws information that it already knows. It's stored and you can ask it questions on the fly and how it can give you responses back and you can work off those. And then combining those two into another article that I not watched, read this time, is the achievement gap, which technology and VR and AI can help kind of lessen, is by e-learning industry, which talks about how the achievement gap could be kind of, not kind of, how it could be shrunk, I believe, shrunk by using like stuff like VR and AI to help students and make it be more like interesting and more interactive and keep students more engaged within the subject matter. And then one of the things I was listening to during my PLP time was my Ed Tech Life podcast, which has its, and there's a link to the podcast in my website, where Dr. Fons, I believe he is Italian. I don't know for sure, but that he this podcast focuses on not just educators but creators and big names in the tech industry to kind of look at the struggles and successes of where technology is, where it can be improved, where it can be implemented even more but it's not all just tech. It's also about teaching principles. Like one of the most recent episodes was talking about taking math and how to take math anxiety and turn it into excitement, which is something I'm actually learning in mathematical thinking. I think it's EDEE 325 with Dr. Mundy. And it's taking how anyone can learn math, it's just how it's presented and how the ideas that we've had about math, about worrying more about the end product rather than the process and what should be rewarded. Because in that class specifically, not in the podcast, but it relates to it because it reminded me of it. That Dr. Mundy said that we shouldn't we should no longer be praising children just for getting 2 plus 2 equals 4. It's that they understand that 2, what is 2 numerically and phonetically, how it adds to itself to get to 4. That they get that, not just the fact of 2 plus 2 equals 4. So it's just interesting that my EdTech Life podcast was more than just tech. It focuses in on actual concepts and issues that educators have on making the classroom more interesting when you can't always use interactive tools all the time, or it's more of dry content. And then at the end of all this, I read my final article was actually from Purdue University talking about how technology has changed education. And it's a little bit dated. I believe it's from like a year ago, year and a half ago maybe, and how it says that it should be that educators should be wary on using technology, but that it's very promising what it can do. And that while doing all of this research and reading and attending the webinars and watching videos and listening to podcasts on hour and a half drives to college because of traffic, because everyone knows traffic is literal hell everywhere, no matter where you live at, that there are ways that I, as a science and history teacher, can make the classroom more engaging, more interesting, and make it to where the students may want to learn and come to see things. Like an interesting example from the university that I go to from here at College of Charleston, I had a professor my first year. It was modern history. I will never forget him, Professor Ben Schaefer. Brilliant professor. I love everything how he does his class. He has a huge love for maritime and naval history, which is what he based his modern history class around. But then next semester he did pre-modern history or classics history, and to kind of show his or to give a more like model of how like Romans fought on their ships, he actually used a video game called Total War, and I think it's like Roman Empire or Roman Total War Rome, where you can have units that are pretty historically accurate to what ships look like and how they fired and how they moved, and kind of replicated a naval battle, which was super cool. I'm not saying I'm gonna bring like Age of Empires to show how that's an old game for anyone who remembers it, but showing it how like medieval warfare was fought. But it's cool that to think outside the box rather than just stand in a lecture or a lectern and just speak. It makes it more engaging for students, and it makes it more like, I'm not going to say silly, but it makes it more playful, and it makes history a little bit more tangible, which is what I want to be able to do with history specifically. That's what I want my focus to be on. And history is definitely one of those, it's more of a dry subject. I think math and history are two of the more drier subjects that are hard to kind of like make interesting because there's nothing you can really add to it. For math, you can gamify it or storyify it, make it a story essentially, like tell stories with it. And the histories is nothing but just stories and facts as well. The most in-depth you can get is more of like personal reflection, like thinking of why did the colony secede from Great Britain, which everyone in the US I would hope at least knows that like the main reasons why, which was unequal representation, high taxes, and just general. This is a broad, like really short, like cut down Spark Notes version of some of the reasons why. the colonies seceded from or gained independence from Great Britain was those reasons. So it's harder to make those classes interesting rather than say science, which has like cool science experiments and dissections, and it's very hands-on. And English is also very hands-on because you put your own person into your writing, your own style. So to know that history and math can be transformative, can spark the imagination and be interactive, just it makes me excited to be an educator with technology hand in hand together to enhance the learning for students. That's just been my quick little take. Thank you again for joining me on Educated Guess, and I hope you all have an amazing night.